And we welcome with us Brewers manager Craig Counsell. Craig, first and foremost, how have you been spending your time during the quarantine, so to speak? I know you have 4 kids, and when the weather permits, I'm sure you're trying to get outside as much as you can and enjoy time with them.
Yeah, I think good weather is obviously here in Wisconsin is always a plus to have a little more outside time. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all doing very much the same thing. There's a little bit of work involved in your day. It's a little bit less. Obviously, it's a lot less for some of us. We're spending a lot of time with our family. We're cooking a little bit. We're trying to work out a little bit and stay active a little bit. So not that much different than everybody else.
What's the most creative thing you've done to kind of pass the time? Because I've heard some creative stuff out there from people.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me right now, I'm kind of hooked on this Spanish app that's like a little almost addictive. It's like challenges you to keep going a little bit farther. So I've been trying to improve my Spanish speaking skills a little bit, and it's fun. Actually, my kids are all in Spanish in school, so they're make me look bad. So that's been kind of the thing that's got me going right now.
Have you been binging any old games or anything along those lines? Because obviously there's been a lot of that content out there.
Yeah, it's funny. The World Series games are probably the games that I'm interested in. I had a friend turn me on to the 1960 Game 7 of the World Series, which is one of the older World Series games, like with video. Mm-hmm. It's the Pirates Yankees. It's Bill Mazeroski's home run. But the Game 7 itself, it's clipped up on YouTube in about an hour for the last three innings, and it is an amazing game. It really is. There's some amazing things that happen, and as a manager, just watching it, and you can kind of play along with all the moves that Casey Stengel is making. And so that I went back and watched that game and sent that to the couple coaches, and we talked about it. It was fun.
I know back in 16 and 17, talking with you during the postseason, you said it's almost impossible not to watch games through the lens of a manager now. Is that still pretty accurate?
Oh, I think, I think we all do that, right? Whatever kind of shoes that we fill, it's hard not to watch games like that. So I do. I've been fortunate to watch a couple of games that I was a player in, and I probably still watch it as a manager. Probably saying I shouldn't have been on the field, but it's fun. That's how I watch games, and that's what I do, and that's where you try to learn a little bit. So that's definitely how I do it.
Craig, speaking of classic games, we're coming up on an anniversary of your managerial debut on May 4th of 2015. It was against the Dodgers. You get named the manager, and oh, by the way, you get to face Clayton Kershaw that night, which was a fun assignment, I'm sure. But what a day for you, and I'm sure it's something that you've looked back on plenty of times since. But to go from a kid that was running around County Stadium growing up to then get a play for the Brewers, get a play in multiple postseasons with the Brewers, then work in the front office, and then become the manager. I mean, that's an unbelievable journey, and it culminated on that night.
Yeah, it was a long day. I'll say that. Because everything had happened so fast. There was a press conference that morning where it was announced, and where you had to, we kind of got that all out of the way, so to speak. There was obviously a big meeting with the team. It's the first time you're going in front of the team, and then there's a game. So, and then there's preparation, and then there's the game. So, obviously a ton went into that day. And looking back on it, it's a lineup card that I have in my office. It's amazing how much things change, right? I think that's probably what I learned from looking at that lineup card in my office.
It's incredible looking at the lineups for both teams. Even, I mean, looking at the Dodgers lineup, Jock Peterson's the only position player that was in the lineup that night that's still with the Dodgers now, and of course Kershaw would be the other exception to that rule, and plenty has changed outside of Ryan Braun with the Brewers since that night. You said it. That's a wild day. There's so much going on. So I don't know that there's a ton of time to reflect until it's all over, right? Were you finally able to take a deep breath when you got home after that night was over?
Maybe a little bit, but there was probably no, I guess would be the best answer, because it was really like there was so much to do with the coaching staff, with the trainers, with players that you wanted to start messaging and changing some cultural things. So there was, that was really just 3 hours of fun, frankly, for the night. And then I felt like it was like back to work for the bigger task at hand, really. So I'm not sure that, probably not until I got on the road. I don't even remember where the first road trip was to. I remember an early trip to New York, though, but that I really probably got to relax for a couple minutes and take a deep breath and think about what was going on.
Your first year with the Brewers, you had 1 year and then left and then came back and finished your career as a player. How different was your first game when you came out onto the field at Miller Park as a player versus when you were a manager, just in terms of how it all felt?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the first game playing back in Milwaukee for me was a big deal, I would say, to get a chance to play in your hometown. A lot had happened for me as a player, but it was still, I'm guessing it was opening day in 2004, so it was still, those are still big games and great moments. The first game as a manager, there's a, you're not really sure if you're ready for it. You felt like you were taking on a really big task, and your job is to kind of just focus at what's at hand at that point. So it was different, but it was definitely, I think, as a player, I had been doing that for 12, 13 years. When I got to Milwaukee, as a manager, that was day number one ever doing that. So it was probably a little more nervous managing for sure.
Hector Gomez is the great trivia from that game. He hit 2 triples in his career. One of them was that night. He hit 1 home run in his career, and it was that night in the 8th inning off of Clayton Kershaw, and started the rally that was finished against Chris Hatcher, where you score 3 runs and you go on to win the game 4-3. That's an amazing little anecdote from that game. Yeah,
the fact that it was his only career, major league home run, and it was off Clayton Kershaw. I'll always remember that. I'll never forget that he had 1 home run, and it was in the first game I managed and against Clayton Kershaw. So I'll never forget Hector Gomez's name. Some of the other names on that list may run out of my memory bank in a couple of years, but I won't forget Hector Gomez.
And Kershaw pitched well that night. Kyle Loesch opposed him on the mound, and just a really cool way to open up your career as the Brewers manager. What have you learned from that day to this day as a manager that maybe you didn't anticipate you were going to learn when you first took the job?
Oh, that's kind of a big question. Probably could spend quite a few hours on that one. Yeah, I mean, I think, I think some things don't surprise you. I think dealing with players has always been, or communicating with players and understanding players has been, probably on the easier end of me, or what I expected. I think, managing people and managing your staff, the media, and how that message is very critically important to the organization. And then I think managing front offices, kind of managing up, so to speak, I think and being a partner with them is something I've learned a lot about.
How did that help you, having that time in the front office? Because there is so much communication between front office and the on-field staff, maybe even more so now than there was 20, 30 years ago. How did that help you kind of connect those two things?
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned a process from a lot of these guys. I mean, Carl Muller is a guy in the front office who's been there for years, and we spent hours talking, texting, and he really did a great job of helping me understand how somebody would think. Doug Melvin gave me a lens into his world. Gord Ash gave me a great lens into kind of the operational part of his world. So those 3 guys I always thought really they just gave me a great education. And that's what those 4 or 3.5 years were. They were a fabulous education on like what does the front office do for a Major League Baseball team? And then I realized how critical they were to our success. And I think that's really helped me as you proceed through this, and you understand that you're going to get different opinions, and your jobs are to actually provide different opinions, and how that works together is really important.
You use the rest of 15 to kind of set that foundation, if you will, but it really felt like in spring training of 16 is where you were able to really get your feet underneath of you, and that culture has been present ever since. What did the rest of 15 give you to kind of prepare you for that first full season when you were with the team in Arizona to start that year?
Yeah, I think the rest of 15, probably most importantly for me, was about just managing games as much as just having not done that, just managing games and getting a feel for what I like to do during games. That was probably what I got the most from 15. Jerry Narin, who was at the time the bench coach, and Rick Kranitz, the pitching coach, I leaned on them a lot. They taught me a lot for sure. And then, so that's probably what I got the most of from the rest of that season, is just, you got 100 chances to make mistakes, right? In game, take chances, do different things, see how they're perceived by players. And I think it was important for me to really, you gain confidence in what you're doing is right and what things you got to change up a little bit. And I think that's how it works.
I know you've mentioned a lot of different influences for you as a manager, but I know Bob Melvin was one of those guys that you've talked about in the past that you leaned on a lot as a player, and then even later to just pick his brain and what a good person to absorb knowledge from.
Yeah. So Bob's always just been a kind of a mentor and a friend, really, since I was a player. And we've always just kind of clicked as far as how we've seen the game and how we've seen, I think, I always respected how he dealt with players and communicated with players, just in a very fair way. No smoke, just fair. And I thought, so we've always had a great exchange of ideas, and you end up running kind of problems and successes bounce them off each other, and it's a helpful relationship. It really is. I think it helps us both. Sometimes you feel like you need people you need mentors, you need friends that you can consult with, and that's what Bo Mel and I still try to do.
Take me through now as a player in 2008 to be able to be a part of that team that got the Brewers back to the postseason in what had been such a long drought. As a native Milwaukeean, what was that moment like for you?
Yeah, I mean, 2008, I think was it was a special year just because of the length of time that the Brewers had not been in the playoffs, right? And really for the players in that team, it's going to sound strange, but like, we were sick of hearing about 1982. And not that 1982 was great. I was 12 and I was a kid. It was a great memory. But as a player, you wanted, you would kind of want to make Brewers make their own memories. And so it was just really important that, and you just felt, I always felt like just we need to make the playoffs. It's just critical. And so that last week when, the season went great, really, and then it fell apart a little bit in September. But the last week was a really magical week. It really was. It was I'll never forget some of those games and driving home in those nights and thinking we got a chance, even though things looked pretty bleak with kind of 2 weeks left in the season.
CC is the name that, if you talk about 2008, you have to talk about CC Sabathia, because it doesn't happen without him. The trade, the timing of the trade, which is pretty rare unto itself to come so early, but then for him to go out and take the ball as often as he did to get you guys into the postseason, it's really one of the great individual 3-month, 4-month stretches, maybe along with Christian Yelich's second half of 2018 in Brewers history.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I don't think you can ever overstate what he did. it was one of the greatest, second half of the seasons I think anybody's ever had. And the impact he had in the team was as big an impact as anybody's ever had in a baseball team in a short amount of time. And then he did things the last month that were just heroic. I mean, literally put the team on your shoulders. I don't think you often hear that about a pitcher, right? You just don't, because they can't affect enough games. But when he decided to pitch every 4 days, he literally was putting the team on his shoulders and affecting so many games and really winning the games almost single-handedly.
2010, Trevor Hoffman, who's become a great friend of yours, collects his 600th save in a Brewers uniform. And you got the benefit of being involved in all three of those outs. There was the double play and then the final out as well, playing from the shortstop position. How special was that for you to be able to contribute to that monumental moment for him?
Yeah, it was a fun night. It was kind of, it wasn't a great season for us. But I remember that night really, made all of us feel like, hey, this is why baseball is great, because this wasn't a great season, but we get to celebrate a moment like this or have a moment like this in our stadium. And it was really a special night at Miller Park. It really was. There was that special energy that you get from the big game. And so, Trevor was obviously, he's a Hall of Famer. He's just a special person. That's just a blessing to be around. So, yeah, I mean, that I get a little highlight associated with that has always been a thrill for me for sure.
Watching the final out, everybody is swarming him and congratulating him, and you're kind of standing back a little bit. It almost felt like you were just soaking it in, and then you were kind of the one to usher his kids in to the mix so he could see them when it was over. It felt like you were really present in that moment and you understood the significance of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you try to. I was older then, probably close to Trevor's age, and I think we all want those things to go right, and I just wanted to give him some help in making sure it went exactly right. He had done such a great job with his boys and kind of like introducing them or keeping them involved in the baseball world and still keeping his family together as much as he possibly could. And they belong there in that moment with him. So it was, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you're looking out for everybody and playing the den mom a little bit, and trying to help everybody get it right.
In 2011, it's a little bit like 2008, a different set of circumstances, but it's coming down to the final days of the season, and to win the Central, and then of course to go on and have the dramatic Game 5 win in the NLDS. Probably easy to say that even though you've won a couple of World Series, that season as well is up there for you in terms of the most memorable moments that you had as a player. After 2008, did you think, okay, it could get better than this, and it could be like an even bigger moment than this as a player in a Brewers uniform?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did because, look, it was Fielder and Braun, and they were in the primes of their career, and they were really at the time when they were great players, and they're hitting third and fourth in a lineup. You feel like you got this window to do something special. So, yeah, I mean, I think we definitely thought we had a chance, and then we made a big trade for Zach Greinke. That was a pretty big signal that we were putting a lot of chips forward and trying to have this be a special team. And I think that was a team where when we showed up in spring training, we knew it was one of those teams where we're really good. We knew we were really good. And so, I thought we had a chance to do something special. I think we all thought it for the entire season.
Niger had the big hit in Game 5. Carlos Gomez is at second base. He scores, of course, on the hit back up the middle. The personality that Niger Morgan was, I mean, you can't really say his name without smiling and thinking of the 2011 season specifically. What did that personality bring to the clubhouse day in and day out?
Yeah, it just was. He was just the definition of energy. He was kind of out of his mind and a little bit off the rocker, but it was exactly what the team needed. And so you really can't I use the soup analogy a lot, and this was like bringing this completely different ingredient to the soup. And it's always, when I think general managers do that or teams do that, it's like, well, this could taste really good or this could go dreadfully wrong. And in this case, it went really, really good. And he added something that was really hard to find. And it brought out, I think the fun in everybody is what it did as much as anything. He had a great way of doing that. Because he never had a bad day. No matter what was going on, it felt like he was having a good day.
When Gogo got to second and Morgan's at the plate at that point, was there any doubt in your mind that Niger was going to come through right there?
Yeah, the game was a strange game in that, the game happened exactly the way we wanted. And John Axford, who had been perfect during the season, it didn't go right. We were probably fortunate to get out of the game, to get out of the inning tied, and then he ended up having a good next inning. But I don't know. I think you're just hoping for something good to happen. We'd give ourselves a scoring opportunity, and you're hoping something good happens. So, it happened in a great way. Niger meant a lot to that team, added a lot to that team, and so it was a perfect guy to get that hit.
Craig, in 2017 as a manager, you come up a game short of the wild card, come back in 2018, and Christian Yelich is a part of the team. Lorenzo Cain is a part of the team. And this was kind of one of those teams, as you just mentioned. I think going into that year, there was a feeling like this is a postseason baseball team. And Christian Yelich's second half was one of the most amazing things we've ever seen. He hit 2 cycles in very short order, both against the Cincinnati Reds, one on the road and one at home. As a manager, to sit back and watch somebody do what he did during that MVP season, how many times were you just left almost speechless because there were no more adjectives to describe what he was doing?
I think often would be he just the second half was as good as I've ever seen somebody play the game. And he did it in huge moments. He did it for a team that desperately needed it. We weren't a playoff lock. We were playing kind of for our lives every day, it felt like. And so, he did it under circumstances that were challenging as well. So it was a wonderful second half of the season. It was just a great time of baseball. We had so much fun playing baseball in September, and it's, we got to a point where we weren't, I don't think we were ever like have to win or we're done, but our backs were against the wall for a pretty good portion of that month. And so we played really meaningful games, really challenging games, really intense games for a long time. I remember the Cubs series, a couple of the games at home, kind of right after Labor Day, I believe. It was they were intense games. And, we lasted through it and actually thrived through it, which I was really proud of the guys for doing that.
How different did game 163 feel versus a typical postseason type of game? Because it's a similar atmosphere and there's a sense of urgency to it, but to me, it felt just a little bit different going into that game.
Yeah, I think what was different is that it's I think on the inside, what you felt is that, one, the game happened so quickly after, it was Sunday to a Monday game, which doesn't happen for the playoffs. There was a game the next day after a game, so that made it feel odd. There was no the Major League Baseball takes over playoff games. There was no Major League Baseball involved in that game, and so on the inside, you kind of felt that. So it was different from that perspective, and it did feel. And I think the other thing is that we just played them so often. In a sense, it kind of feels like a crapshoot because you play them all the time, and you kind of beat each other up, and you have great moments and you have difficult moments, and so it comes down to one game, and we had to go down there, but we pitched just a beautiful game that day.
You had played in a lot of postseason baseball. You had not managed yet until that year in postseason games. And yet it felt like you had been managing in postseason games forever because it is a different game. There's just so much different about managing in the postseason versus the regular season. And yet you seemed really comfortable and very sure about the moves that you made and who you were going to start and who you were going to use out of the pen in different situations. How do you think you were so prepared for that?
Well, I think we spend a lot of time preparing for it. It's not just me. It was a group effort for sure. I think in both cases, we spent the month of September in 17 and in 2018, pretty, in my eyes, like that was the challenge for everybody. Like these are playoff games, and we thought of them as playoff games from a pitching perspective. So there was, I felt like, and from that, if you go back to 17, there was 30 games there. There was 30 games in 18. We were 60 games into playoffs from my perspective on how we had to think about the games. And I think our guys were really prepared for that.
Well, Craig, we appreciate it. Those are some great moments, and you've been around for so many of them with the Brewers organization, and plenty more on the horizon as well. Thank you for spending some time with us, and stay healthy.
All right. Have a great day. Thanks.